Concentric Circles of Concern by W. Oscar Thompson, 1981. Chapter 5, Part C, pages 76 through 83. And still another. I had another student come to me and say, Dr. Thompson, when my brother got into the drug culture 2 years ago, things really got bad at home. So he left. He started to do his own thing. He was addicted, probably selling it and everything else. What should I do? I love him, but I feel so helpless. I don't know how to find him. Well, that is no problem, I told him. God knows where your brother is. Sometimes we pray like, Father, I don't know if you can do this or not. But when you intercede for someone, it is like a guided missile. It is instantaneous, and it is on target. There is no defense. That student began praying for his brother. One day, the student came into my office and said, I received a call for my brother. He has been converted and is going home. My student almost sounded disappointed because he did not get to witness to his brother. But let me say this, he was ready to witness to him. His heart was right with God, and through his intercession, his brother was freed to choose the Lord. I was told one day, my brother will not get within 100 yards of a church. We cannot reach him. You try to talk to him. Dear friend, I said, you can pray for him. He cannot resist prayer because God breaks down those walls and barriers. Your prayers, you pray, Father, open his eyes to his spiritual condition and set him free. Lord, engineer circumstances in his life to draw him to you. It will thrill you to see what God will do if you will make your life available. We have a sensational God. He deals in the impossible. He specializes in the impossible. You must intercede for those in your circles. You must pray to God, for God to meet their spiritual, physical, and whatever needs they have. You are his vessel. You must be available. Another student who had graduated was back on campus several months ago. Entering my office, he laid his ragged concentric circles notebook in my hands. Dr. Thompson, here is my notebook, he said. I want you to look at it. That young man, who had never led anyone to the Lord before, in 1 year had led to the Lord 38 people listed in his concentric circles. Senior adults, we need you. We need to mobilize our retired people, shut-ins, and our senior adults in our churches to pray because they have more time to pray. They can provide a powerful ministry in our churches. Over the years, I have had shut ins and retired people pray for me. How thankful I am for them. While I was at Baylor, a dear little saint prayed for me. At the time, I had a church in Gonzales. I drove back to Baylor every Sunday night. My husband has already gone to be with the Lord, the dear lady explained to me. I am here alone and have much time to pray. I am going to pray for you each Sunday night until I know that you are back in the dorm. One night, just out of Round Rock, north of Austin, I came upon a terrible wreck. I was the first person on the scene and offered to help. I was delayed several hours, so I did not get back to the dorm until about 4:30 a.m. 4:30 a.m. The next weekend, I went home to my church. The dear lady who promised to pray for me called asking, "Where were you Sunday night?" "What do you mean?" I asked. "You kept me awake until 4:30 p.m. praying for you," she answered. God would not let her go to sleep until I was safe. Those of you who are up in years, listen to me. You say, there is not much I can do anymore. But do not tell me that, because it is not true. You can provide until Jesus calls you home the most profitable time of all your life in intercessory prayer. Why not link yourself with some young families who are having problems? Not to interfere, just pray for them. Become their prayer umbrella. Find out about some of the young people who need prayer. All of them need prayer. You can become a vital part of their lives by praying for them. Also, pray daily for your pastor, your church, and the entire staff, the other staff members. Pray for our president, our country. Listen, there are battles to be won in prayer. Become intercessors. That is what we need. Oh, how we need you. Just go through your concentric circles and pray for your Jerusalem, your Judea, your Samaria, and your world. It will change your life as much as it will change the many lives that you are praying for. Praying, meeting their needs will allow God to meet yours. It works in Sunday school too. Can you imagine what would happen in your Sunday school if your Sunday school used concentric circles as its outreach program? First, each person would do a survey. Then he would begin to intercede every day. Intercession is not a "Dear Lord, bless me and my wife, my son John and his wife, us four, no more," and jump into bed. No, each person would genuinely intercede by surrounding others with prayer. Intercession would become a lifestyle. Ruptured relationships would be righted. Walls would have to be torn down and new educational buildings built to hold everyone. Burden from the Lord. Carolyn accepted an adult ladies class at the church I was pastoring. That class had never that class had just never made it. With about 25 on the class roll, its average attendance was 3, 2 plus the teacher. The Lord gave Carolyn a heavy burden for this class. She knew that he wanted her to take it. One afternoon, she brought home the class roll. Of the 25 names on the roll, she knew only 5. Carolyn decided that what these ladies needed most at that time was intercession. So an hour or two each day that week, she prayed for all 25 members. Then she invited then she invited to our home the 4 members who attended occasionally. A definite plan. Carolyn laid out to the 4 members this plan. Each person, including Carolyn, would take the names of 5 women who were on the class roll and pray for each one daily. The ladies agreed. They were not to contact the other women, just to pray for them. Now they had a plan. Nothing becomes dynamic until it becomes specific. Since we had only been at the church a couple of weeks, Carolyn asked if the women knew the others on the roll. Some they knew, but some they didn't. All 4 ladies seemed to be familiar with Nancy, who was on Carolyn's prayer list. All 4 ladies warned, do not try to visit Nancy. She and her husband, Harry, are very bitter towards the church. Harry will slam the door in your face. He may even be dangerous to someone from the church. They have been hurt and are very bitter. Carolyn thanked the ladies for their advice, but reminded them that the Lord specializes in cases like this one, and that He loves this family. She said, we will pray that the Lord will engineer circumstances so that we can love them and meet their needs. About 3 weeks later, an aide from a hospital who attended Carolyn's class called Carolyn, saying that Nancy was in the hospital with pneumonia. Carolyn and one of the class members went to visit Nancy. They took her some flowers. Nancy was appreciative. The class member with Carolyn offered to take care of Nancy's children while she was in the hospital. Nancy really appreciated this help because she did not know how they were going to manage. Finally, Carolyn and the other woman left their phone numbers in case there was anything else they could do. The next day, Nancy called Carolyn and said that her husband had been brought to the hospital. He had fallen and injured himself. Immediately, Carolyn and I went to the hospital to meet Harry. When he walked into his hospital room, when we walked into his hospital room, he beamed with appreciation for the lady's help. Instead of an angry, bitter man, he was just like a big old teddy bear. Little things mean so much. The next week, when Nancy and Harry went home from the hospital, the Sunday school class took food to them. Nobody threw the women out this time. Nancy and Harry were so grateful. You see, all they needed was God's love to flow through God's people to them. It is difficult to fight genuine love. God did not cause the sickness or the injury. That is not how He operates. But He allowed it to happen so that Nancy and Harry could see the love of God. He had prepared their hearts to accept it, to accept us. Nancy and Harry and their two children were in Sunday school and in church for the next Sunday and very rarely missed anything at the church from that time on. God answers prayer. Do you care enough to intercede? After the experience with Nancy and Harry, and after the four ladies had prayed for their five ladies, a love began to develop within these women that made them want to meet needs. They began to reach out to these families in love. One by one, these women began to come to Sunday school. They were in a concentric circle. They had a contact. They knew they would walk into a class and the one who had reached out to them would be there. A trip to the hospital. Out of the four ladies, one of the four ladies was concerned with a lady we will call Jan, who not only was having mental problems, but also family problems. Jan came to Sunday school regularly for 5 weeks. One day after class, Jan came to Carolyn and said, I just want you to know that I will be out of town next Sunday. We are going to visit my family out of state. As Jan talked, Carolyn wrote her name and phone number on a slip of paper, handed it to Jan, and she put it in her purse. In 2 or 3 days, Carolyn received a phone call from the hospital. Jan had taken an overdose of sleeping pills. When the ambulance had come, Jan told the driver to get the sheet of paper from her purse and to radio for Carolyn to come to get the children at her house. She said she did not know whom else to call. Christ becoming real. A lady in Carolyn's class began to intercede for Jan. Jan was able to begin to deal with her own problems, as Christ became real in her life. Within 6 months, she was able to begin reaching out to meet other people's needs. She and her husband were reunited and they took vital roles in the church. In only 3 months, the class had at least 25 members present each Sunday and had to find a larger meeting place in the assembly area. From their survey, their intercessory prayers, and building bridges, within 7 months, the class averaged 35 to 40 women each Sunday. That is what can happen when a Sunday school gets ready. When a Sunday school gets really serious about concentric circles, about loving, about meeting needs, about intercession. What about the church? Can you imagine what would happen if a whole church began to take a survey, to intercede, to start working through their concentric circles? We would go into a worship service expecting, anticipating God's working in hearts and lives. Dick, another of my students, went out to pastor a little country church. It was one of those situations where the church had been there forever and they planned to remain there forever. But they did not plan on doing anything. They did not plan to do anything. When they were looking for a preacher, usually a student, they hired him if they liked him. Then, if they changed their minds, they would fire him. Dick said, "Dr. Thompson, what should I do? I preach, nothing happens. I want them to pray, but they do not want to. They say they hired me to pray. I want them to go visiting. They do not want to go visiting because they say visiting is my job." These people could take the heart out of a hickory log. They do not want to do anything, but they did want to have a meeting. I said the word. I know the word was meeting. The word is revival. But they wanted a meeting. So I said, "Dick, why don't you share concentric circles with them?" He did. After his presentation, one of the deacons said, "Preacher, I have a son who was married in this church last summer. He and his bride have not been back since. I have not even thought about it. I am going to put them down in my circles and pray for them." Then a little grandmother came up to Dick and said, You know, I have a granddaughter who is 14. She has never made a profession of faith. I am going to pray for her. Several others told Dick that the message had reminded them of someone to pray for. Well, this little church had its meeting. They also had 17 professions of faith, which doubled the size of their congregation. The people were excited that they the people were so excited that they kept adding to their surveys. These who once could have taken the heart out of a hickory log were interceding, building bridges, confronting people, and learning what the word disciple means. This is revival. These people had caught the vision of their Jerusalem, their Judea, their Samaria, and their world, and how the gospel moves through concentric circles.